Welcome back. We're still working on our environment setup on a Mac. In our last video, we talked about Bash versus the Z shell. If you haven't sorted that out, make sure you go to one video previous to this in the playlist and make sure that you're on Z shell. Although you should be able to do this even if you haven't done that. The next thing that we're going to do is we are going to go ahead and we are going to download and install Anaconda. Most people are going to actually use the visual installer, so we'll go ahead and do that. We're going to be using the individual edition. That's the data science toolkit. We want to go to our downloads. I'm dealing with a Mac OS. I'm going to go ahead and use the graphical installer. We could certainly use the command line installer instead, although the graphical installer is a little bit more user friendly, so we'll go ahead and do that method instead. While this is downloading, we can also talk about the fact that you don't even need to actually go to this website to make this download, right? There are tools in the command line where you could go to this URL if you had it and make this download and execute this file from the command line without ever having to open a browser. There are also package managers that you could use on your computer to install Anaconda directly without ever having to go to the Anaconda website, right? And the main one of those is called Homebrew, right? If I go to Homebrew, right, and I go to their website, it tells me, right, it gives me a single command that I can run in my terminal to actually install Homebrew. It talks a little bit about what Homebrew does. Homebrew is a package manager. It installs packages into their own directory, and then it symlinks their files into the user local, right? That might not mean a ton to you, but what this means is on a systems level is that it's really easy to uninstall packages, right? Typically when we install a package or a piece of software, it kind of puts files all over the place, right? Most of the files are in its own folders and things are self-contained, but it does have files that the system needs access to that is put into system folders that are actually linked in different places, and Homebrew just helps you manage that so you can have really clean uninstalls as well as clean installs. Anaconda, there's not a huge issue with that. Anaconda is a really clean install on its own, so we're not going to need to worry about that just too much on its own. But that's Homebrew. You can certainly read about it. I would suggest that you do use Homebrew at some point. It's mostly a tool for macOS. Linux also uses it. They make a version for Linux. It's not very popular. Linux actually has a built-in version that works pretty well. But my download is completed here, so I'll just go ahead and start. First thing it says, hey, are you sure you knew where you downloaded this from? I want to make sure it's safe. And then we have our typical license agreements, and I'm going to install this just for myself only. I don't need to install it in a very specific place or for all of the users of this computer, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit continue there. I'm going to go ahead and let it install in its default location because I think that's what most people will do, and it's been putting it in a little bit of an odd place, and there have been some issues, and that's an issue that I want to make sure that I work through in this video so everyone can understand how to do this really effectively. So we've got this, this is running, it's doing its package script thing. We'll just give it a moment. I guess it is worth time to take a moment and talk about exactly what Anaconda is. So it says that Anaconda is, this data science product or this data science sort of package But what Anaconda is really in terms of the way that we're going to use it is a package manager, right? And you might say, well, hey, we were just talking about Homebrew. You said that Homebrew was a package manager, right? So the difference between these two things are that Homebrew is a package manager for your entire computer. So it will manage different pieces of software installations. Say if you were working in multiple languages, for example, I have a lot of Java stuff on here. I have some JavaScript development things on this computer as well. I use Homebrew to manage all of those things. Anaconda specifically is a package manager for Python, right? And it comes pre-packaged with a number of things. You'll see that it does come with an IDE. IDE is short for Integrated Development Environment. That's not something that you're going to be using in the data science immersive very often. And the it also comes with like some other desktop utilities, most of which you will not be using. In fact, I've never used any. It actually comes with an Anaconda Navigator or Anaconda Launcher, and that's not anything that I've ever used before. So most of what we're going to use from Anaconda is its set of Python packages, and then we're going to use it as a package manager. So now that we've gotten that done, it says, oh, we can work with Python and Jupyter Notebooks, and we can do that in PyCharm Professional with the PyCharm IDE, which it is suggesting that I install, and I'm not really too worried about that. At the end, it asked me, do you want me to move this file to the trash? And I said, I sure do. I don't need or want that anymore. So I'm just going to make sure that I have a nice new terminal open here to make sure that any changes that needed to happen have been updated. And the first thing I want to do is I kind of want to check in here and just see if my conda has installed correctly. And it looks as if it has, but I want to make sure that's actually the case. So I'm going to type conda info, and it actually tells me a bunch of information about Anaconda here, right? So I was actually unable to recreate the error that I was looking for. So bear with me for a second. I think I will be able to recreate that error if you give me a moment. I want to be in my users and me, and I am looking for the .zshrc file. Open up this file. I'm gonna get rid of this. I just need to make sure that I have something open where I have all of that gobbledygook saved before I get rid of it. I'm gonna save that. Save that. Go ahead and close it down. And I'm gonna close this terminal. Then I'm gonna open up a new one and zoom in. So this is likely what most of you are going to encounter after you have installed your Anaconda using the visual installer, if you've already switched to the Z shell, right? And you're going to say, okay, I've got Anaconda. I want to make sure it's there. The command that we're going to make sure it's there with is conda info. And right now we have this issue called conda, or the Z shell is saying that command is not found. Conda command is not found. I don't know where to find that, right? So Anaconda's installer package, for some reason, is still making the assumption that most of the users are using a bash terminal. So the information that it's giving for the computer to actually find the Anaconda command is in a folder that's in a different place than we're looking for. So what we're going to want to do is we're going to first we need to make sure that we know where our Anaconda 3 installation is. We're going to do that. The folder will be named Anaconda 3, right? We're going to need to search our entire Mac. You're likely going to have a bunch of files with that in it. So we're actually going to want to make sure that we limit that search down to folders, right? And the default place where it's installing Anaconda 3 is in the home directory in a folder called OPT, short for opt. So we just need to remember that. And what we're going to do is we need to put this in the path, right? And there's a couple of ways we could do that, but I'm gonna say conda command not found Mac. It autofilled for me. This is a very common thing. This is happening to a lot of people. So, you know, it's pretty common that it's a common skill that you're going to develop that you can just take your error code, copy and paste it, and put it into Google and see what comes up, right? And here's what we're dealing: Anaconda not found in Z shell. That's exactly the problem that we have. This actually gives us a solution, right? And this tells us export path, right? Blah, blah, blah. This is something that we want to do. And what it wants us to do is it wants us to put this into our .zshrc file, right? That's a file that I had open a little bit previously. If I go back to my users, my home directory, look at it in the form of a list, go to .zshrc, take a look at that, right? This is all of the customization that I have done to my terminal window. And the last thing that I'm going to want to do is it's given me this command that I want to do, this export path, but it's given me this export path in sort of generic terms, right? This is not my actual username, right? My actual username is Lance Bartow, right? And then this is Miniconda 3. That's not the name of our folder. The name of our folder is Anaconda 3. And then it has its own bin folder full of binaries, right? And just so you know, path is a variable, a shell variable that references all of the places that your terminal will look for commands when you type a command in. So we are adding this path, this directory, to the places where our terminal can find commands, right? It has a set of those set up by default, but we're adding to that default by adding this to our .zshrc file. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to make sure that I go ahead and give that a save, and then go ahead and close it, and close my terminal, get another new one open, and get zoomed in here again for you so you can all see. And now I still have conda not found. Let me double check. Oh, that's because I did not put in the correct path. For those of you watching, you were probably watching me saying, no, you forgot the opt. You forgot the opt. Put that opt in there, right? Now I open this up. We'll see. I'm not seeing what I want to, so I'm not sure if this is going to work. But it actually does work, right? So I've added that directory. Now, I'm going to check this out real quick and see if it does what I want it to do. So, I've run this command called conda init, and what it does is it actually initializes conda specifically to it's actually doing it to my bash profile, right? As I mentioned, Anaconda is still sort of operating under this assumption that I'm using a bash profile, but that's not the case. So it says for these changes to effect, you need to close and reopen the current instance of the terminal. But I'm not going to worry about doing that. I am going to quit my terminal entirely and open up a new one. And, let's go ahead and go into that bash profile. Oops. So the bash profile will be in the same place that the .zshrc file is. So that's going to be a .bash profile. You can see that here. And I can see that there's a bunch of stuff in here. But specifically, right, a lot of this actually has to do with conda, right? Some of these are some exports. Some of these are actually artifacts from previous conda installs that I've had. But the one that I'm looking for right now is the conda initialize, right? And when I see this conda initialize, it says contents within this block are managed by conda init, right? It has this conda setup, right? It has this file path that I gave it, right? The opt Anaconda 3 bin conda. It has an if else statement, right? This might seem somewhat familiar. This is not Python, but we can kind of understand what some of these things are talking about, right? And amongst this, right, we can actually see that command that we put into our file, right? But what I'm going to want to do is that command conda init actually added this to this .bash profile. I'm going to copy all of these contents. Then I'm going to go zoom on over to my zshrc file. And where I previously just had that single command, I'm going to go ahead and replace that with this entire thing, this entire conda initialize block, right? And then I'll go ahead, give that a save, and give that a close. And then I will close my terminal. I'll get a brand new terminal open all the way from scratch. And now I'm seeing what I want to see, right? You'll notice that before, right, my prompt just started with this Lance's MVP for MacBook Pro. Right now, what I have over here is this little indicator on the left that tells me that my conda environment is working. Right, and what it's indicating is that I am in my base environment. Right, conda gives you the ability to manage some different environments at different times, and we're not going to use that a ton in the DSI. It's a very powerful and useful tool. I would encourage you to explore that. I think if you actually go to conda documentation, and then you go to the managing environments part of the documentation, it tells you all about creating different environments, switching between them. You can actually export an environment with a project, so you could send it to someone else and they could build the environment. And when I talk about the environment, it's the set of packages with exact versions that you built your project on. So they would be able to ensure that everyone is working with the exact same set of tools. So if you have a team working on a project together, this can be really helpful to make sure that everyone's working on the same page. But that's something you can explore a little bit more on your own if you'd like to, or you can just leave for down the road. But for the sake of this video, we used that visual installer. We got Anaconda installed. We ran into the conda not found issue, which is likely something you're going to encounter with the Z shell. We found a command just to get us temporary access to conda, and that was just exporting a path. We found that from Google. I'm also going to make sure that text is in this lesson for you. That command is in this lesson for you. And you'll just have to confirm the path of where your actual Anaconda is. And once we've done that, we ran that command, conda init. That actually put some stuff into our .bash profile file. We searched out that code snippet that it added, the conda initialize block. We copied and pasted that. We moved it over to our .zshrc file, and we saved that. And now we have a working version of Anaconda. For example, right now, if I want to check my Python version, I can do so with this command, Python -v. Or if we said conda is a package manager, I know that NumPy is already installed as a default, but I can say conda install NumPy, and it's going to go out and it's going to install NumPy. Likely this is going to say you already have that installed, so you don't need to. So that's how we're going to use conda primarily, is to manage our packages, manage the things we import when we're working on our Python machine learning data science projects. So that's it for this video. In the next video, we're going to talk a little bit about how we can create a Python file using the command line, opening that file in VS Code, and then actually executing that from the command line. And that will be it for the setup videos for the Mac users. Look forward to seeing you in the next video.